I just wanted to make a short video to share my Livescope build that I added to my boat this year. Depending on what your opinion is on Livescope, you might like it, you might not, but I think we can all agree that it's very, very expensive. So my goal for this whole build was stay cheap, but not look cheap. I wanted to use stuff I had, maybe buy some minimal stuff, fittings and whatever, but I wanted to keep it looking nice so that someone didn't think that it was just thrown together and it kind of looked like crap. So again, my goal was to just stay cheaper and make a build that I'd be happy with on the water. If someone else saw my boat, they'd be like, oh, that looks pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys that. So the first part of my build is this mount here. A mount to just bring it up closer to my face. I really didn't want to buy a 12-inch or just a bigger screen. This is the 93 that Garmin makes. It's not super expensive, but I don't really want to pay $1,500 for a bigger screen just to see. So basically what I did is I found an old scooter. Someone had it on Facebook Marketplace for 15 bucks. With this scooter, all I really had to do was remove this wheel. I cut off the platform where you would stand. I just kind of cut it into a square so that I could just bolt it straight to my decking. That went pretty easy. Just used some bolts with some lock nuts on the bottom, and then I cut the handlebars off. It had this little bracket piece that just slid right into this piece of metal that I had to put the actual mount on there. There was definitely some work involved cutting some metal, but all in all it wasn't too hard of a job. Pretty easy to do, honestly. Any scooter probably will work. This one, I kind of like the base a lot better than some of the other scooters, so that's why I use this one. It kind of works like this. It just locks into place. Then when I'm traveling with it, it just folds right down. When I get on the boat and I'm ready to use it, I can just come over here, lift that up, put it right to face level. It actually moves pretty good. If I'm standing over here, whatever, over here, it moves to wherever I want. So that's basically the first part of the build there. I just wanted it up closer to my face. I already have this one. This is just connected to the transducer on my Garmin Force trolling motor. But it's about waist height. It works pretty good. It even has some extra adjustment in here if I want to go up and down more. Basically, I ran my wire through to here. I had to wire it all the way back to here to my main panel back there. But I ran it right up the scooter shaft there and came out there. That way I didn't have to tape anything to the outside. I mean, I taped it a little bit here, but that's just where it has to come out to connect to the back of that. Overall, I think it came out pretty good, especially for 15 bucks. These mounts, I mean, they go anywhere from 150 to 250 bucks, and I really didn't want to spend that much money on it. So I think it turned out pretty good. The next thing with this build was how I wanted to have my Livescope transducer actually mounted. Some people have a turret style, which this is what I ended up going with. Other people have it on a separate pole that's not attached to the trolling motor. This being the Garmin Force, it has the spot lock, so I really didn't want to have my transducer going like this when I'm in spot lock. So basically what I did is I added a reverse polarity like switch. So basically if you just use this little remote, you can turn it whatever way you want. And it works really good with like drift fishing. If I find a spot, even if I'm not using spot lock, if I'm drifting, say we're drifting this way, I can kind of angle it to where I want. That way I can see on my screen what we're drifting right to. So that turned out pretty good. I didn't really want it on a separate pole, so this actually turned out pretty good, and I'll show you a closer look of how I kind of built that. Once I decided that I wanted to go with a turret mount instead of mounting it directly to my trolling motor or on a separate pole, I still wanted to do it as cheap as possible. Like I said previously, the turret mount that they make for the Garmin Force is close to $900, so that was obviously out of the question. So I purchased a $65 trolling motor off of Facebook Marketplace. It was just an old Minn Kota. It came with a couple extra pedals. I ended up selling those pedals and making money off of those. I just sold them on eBay, but that's beside the point. So $65, I got this mount, obviously the shaft, the motor, everything with it. I just took it apart, kept this mount that it was on, kept the shaft, and built a plate that sits underneath that mounts right in the bolt pattern of my forced trolling motor. So it mounts up right perfectly with the bolt pattern. I kept the shaft that was in it so I could obviously mount the transducer to that. I wanted to mount the cable through the pole itself, but the end of the transducer is probably about the size of a quarter, if not bigger than that, so it doesn't fit through that. So I ended up using just some hose clamps type of thing, and running it up through here just to keep it protected from hitting stuff. I ended up running it through the original power cord that came with the trolling motor. That is just like springy so that it keeps it from getting caught anywhere. It's super protected in that when I'm moving my trolling motor up and down. Then I obviously needed a way to be able to turn this left or right, so I added a reverse polarity box to it. It's basically just changes which way it can go, left or right. Basically it had one of those when it had the foot pedal that would originally work this trolling motor. I just didn't want to have an extra foot pedal where my other foot pedal goes and then have another one here. So basically it just works off this little remote. Left, right. So I can just be standing up here on the platform, move it whichever direction I'm drifting or whichever direction I'm moving, just so that I can see exactly what I'm going towards. I didn't want to have to move it by hand, so this actually turned out really, really well. The mount that I used for this is not the one that it came with. This is a 3D printed one that I got off of eBay. I like this one because you can easily turn it into perspective mode and then right back. It's adjusted so that it's not wobbly or anything like that. I think it was about 50-60 bucks. I would definitely recommend that. Here's a view of the underside. This is the plate that I had made to match the bolt pattern of this. This was on this side. I had to move that to this side, so it just kind of rests on there for now. But I just took some 1/4-inch aluminum. I wanted to keep it light as possible, obviously, and mounted that. I just cut it out, mounted it on here, so it's super, super sturdy. It doesn't wobble around in the water at all. I've had it on the water a bunch of times so far. Most of these mounts, these turret mounts, they're mounted so that this pole that the Livescope transducer is attached to is kind of more in front of the shaft of your trolling motor. I was a little bit worried when I was building it because I didn't want it outside of here, that way it's hanging outside. I have a cover that goes on this and I needed the cover to still get on there. So I put it towards the inside of this, and the transducer actually doesn't even pick up any of this pole on the trolling motor at all, so it actually worked out really good that way. I was kind of worried that it would pick it up, but it does not, and even if it's pointing straight over to this, it works really, really well. As far as how I ran the electrical for this, I did a lot of research on the Livescope transducers, and I read that the black box should probably be on its own dedicated battery because it can pick up static from other stuff that's connected to it. So I went ahead with a 100 amp hour lithium battery. I ran that to a switch because I've also read that the black box can draw power even if, like, when it's hooked up. So I added an on-off switch to this, just a standard kind of marine switch. You got it on Amazon for 13 bucks. All my other wirings right there, the excess cable for the transducer, that obviously all connects up into there. The other wiring up there, that's just for my graphs. That ran up along here, and I ran that off of the 24 volts that I'm using for my trolling motor. I just ran those right into there. Obviously fuses on everything just to protect stuff if there's a surge or anything. So that's pretty much how that's all ran. Tied it up pretty good, actually pretty happy with that. This 100 amp hour battery hasn't even really moved at all as far as charge goes while running this. I've ran it dang near all day a couple times, and it really hasn't drained the power at all on that. So I'm pretty glad I went with that. So overall, pretty happy with how that turned out. So that's pretty much my build. I just wanted to be able to show people that you can not have to spend an arm and a leg to get some of this Livescope stuff. Obviously, excluding the cost of the Livescope itself, I had probably $300 into just random stuff for it, like the scooter, the trolling motor I tore apart, various electrical components, all that stuff. I mean, it was relatively cheap. The 100 amp hour battery, I'm sure you guys were like, oh, you were trying to be cheap and use a lithium battery. I actually got that lithium battery, a trolling motor, and a boat charger for $300 total. So I'm going to sell the trolling motor and the charger, and basically the battery's not going to cost me anything. So that really isn't a cost factor in this whole thing. But a $15 scooter, a $65 old trolling motor were the main parts for that. I bought some grommets and hose clamp type stuff for other stuff like that. But very, very cheap. You don't have to spend all the money on the mount, the graph mounts, the expensive turrets. It can be built yourself if you just take some time and keep it looking good. I'm very happy with how it turned out. I mean, honestly, you can't really tell that it just by walking by, you can't tell that it's like just made by throwing scrap parts together. So I'm pretty happy with it. Let me know what you guys think or what you would have done different. I'm not an expert in this Livescope stuff. I'm just getting into it. So anything you guys are more experienced in, feel free to comment on it and we can have a conversation about it. So thanks.